What's going on, everybody? My name is LuckyBunz, and in today's video I'm going to be breaking down the Team GO Rocket Takeover event in Pokemon Go. With that being said, let's just jump straight into it. So this event is going to take place from March 27th to March 31st from 12 AM to 11:59 PM local time. Now the bonuses are going to be as follows. Like any Team GO Rocket Takeover event, we're going to be able to TM frustration away on our Shadow Pokemon, but in order to do this, you need to have a decent amount of charged TMs ready to go. So what's actually the best way to get charged TMs in Pokemon Go? So the first way is going to be from the Go Battle League Win 2 reward. You actually have a chance to get a charged TM, and it's pretty common in my opinion. Now the second way is going to be to do Mega Raids as well as 3-star raids, because charged TMs are going to be a guaranteed drop. Next up, let's talk about the new Shadow Pokemon that we're going to be getting. So we're going to get a total of 4 new Shadow Pokemon: Pidgey, Darumaka, Gothita, and Solosis. Now Pidgey and Darumaka are going to be meta relevant, but Gothita and Solosis, well, not so much. So let's talk about Pidgey first, which evolves into Pidgeot in its final stage evolution. This will have play in the Great League as well as the Ultra League. Now unfortunately for the raid/gym meta, Pidgeot is just not going to be your guy. He really just doesn't have the stats for it. Now when it comes down to Shadow Darumaka though, for the raid/gym meta, it is going to have some pretty nice meta relevance in the fire type category, but it is still going to be a little bit worse than regular Reshiram with Fusion Flare. I think even without Fusion Flare it's pretty close. So basically when it comes down to it, Reshiram with Fusion Flare is still going to be the move, but Shadow Darmanitan is definitely going to be a good fire type attacker to have in your lineup if you want to have something a little bit different. Moving on though, let's talk about the Team GO Rocket leaders. These are going to be switching rotations, so your last chance to get Shadow Shiny Bagon and Tentacool as well as Zubat will be on March 26th. Now in terms of like if you want to actually hunt these guys hard, how relevant are these Pokemon currently? So for Tentacool, I know that when it evolves into Tentacruel, it does have some play in the Great League, and then when it comes down to Zubat, when it evolves into Golbat as well as Crobat, it does have play in the Great League as well as the Ultra League. And then of course Shadow Bagon, well that one unfortunately doesn't have play in the PvP meta, but it does have play in the raid/gym meta as a dragon type attacker. Now keeping all that in mind, getting a shiny Shadow in general in Pokemon Go is a really difficult thing to do. I mean, some people have crazy shiny Shadow luck, but I personally don't. And so anytime I get one of these, regardless of the IVs, like if I want to power it up for the raid/gym meta, I usually do. It's not the biggest deal in the world, guys, if it doesn't have like the, 3-star IVs or 2-star IVs. If it's a shiny Shadow, then that thing is a flex, and I'm going to want to show one of those off. But unfortunately for me, I just don't have the best luck when it comes down to these things. I was able to get a shiny Shadow Raikou though the other day, which I was pretty hyped about. Gonna definitely be taking that thing to level 40, even though it doesn't have the most amazing IVs. It's actually decent though, it's like 2 stars. Next up, let's talk about 12-kilometer egg. So we're going to be getting a new shiny debut that is going to be for Sandile. Now is this Pokemon actually relevant? Is it worth hunting? In my opinion, probably not. Like in general, guys, I'm not a big fan of hatching eggs to get shiny, so you already know my take on that. I don't really recommend going hard for something like this. If you get it passively, then that's great, but otherwise I just don't really think it's worth the resources. But hey, a new shiny in game, maybe some of you guys want to go for it, totally up to you. Moving on from that, let's talk about the Shadow raids next. So we got 1-star, 3-star, and 5-star raids. Let's start off with the 1-star raids. So you guys are going to have access to Shadow Drowsy, Shadow Poliwag, Shadow Barboach, and Shadow Foongus. Now in terms of the meta relevance, Shadow Drowsy when evolved into Hypno is good for the Great League. Shadow Poliwag when evolved into Poliwrath or Politoed is good for the Great League as well as the Ultra League. Shadow Barboach is good in the Great League, and then Shadow Foongus is not going to be that meta relevant, so don't worry about that one too much, but the other 3 are pretty good. And I forgot to mention this as well, but Shadow Drowsy and Shadow Poliwag can both be shiny, so getting a Shadow shiny for any of those with meta relevance is actually pretty awesome. Now for 3-star raids, we're going to have Shadow Hitmontop, Shadow Wobbuffet, and Shadow Sneasel. Shadow Sneasel can be potentially shiny, and Shadow Wobbuffet is going to have meta relevance when purified in the Great League, and it could also be used as a gym defender as well. Now let's talk about the 5-star raids. So we're going to have Shadow Mewtwo available for 1 weekend only, March 30th and March 31st, 6 AM to 10 PM local time each day. Now Shadow Mewtwo, guys, if you haven't heard me say it like a million times on this channel, it is easily one of the top 5 best Pokemon you can power up in the game, so make sure that you go out and raid this one if it's possible. I've already made a video covering the full relevance of this Pokemon, including whether or not you should actually purify it for the hundo. I'm going to leave a link to that video down below as well as in the top right hand corner right now. Basically, in short though, Shadow Mewtwo is going to be good in the raid/gym meta, it's going to be good in PvP in the Master League, and it's also going to be good to use in rocket battles. So yeah, you get a lot of functionality out of Shadow Mewtwo. In the present timeline though, I would recommend just building one, like just build your best one, or potentially even the shiny if you're able to get that one, and you guys can use that for, raid/gyms as well as for rocket battles. Now if you do actually want to use it for PvP, you want to focus on getting the best possible IV spread for your Shadow Mewtwo, because those IVs will matter. At a minimum, I would say at least 15 attack, just so you get that CMP when you're going against opponents. Without a doubt though, shiny Shadow Mewtwo is probably one of the coolest Pokemon in this game, and if I didn't already have one, I would be going really hard this weekend. Now if you guys want some more information on Mewtwo, once again, just make sure to check out that video link down below. But other than that, I want to get into Shadow Groudon now, which is going to be available from the special research, and that's essentially just using your Super Rocket Radar. Now for those of you of you guys who haven't gotten your Shadow Kyogre yet, the last day to get it from Giovanni will be on March 26th, and I would recommend getting at least one of them at minimum. If you don't want to get it, that's totally fine. It'll eventually come back into raid battles, but seriously, if you have the Super Rocket Radar, if you need to complete the quest anyways, just make sure to get your Shadow Kyogre before March 26th, or sorry, before March 27th, I should say. Now, we are going to talk about Super Rocket Radars later on in this video, so just stay tuned for that, but right now I want to get into the meta relevance for Shadow Groudon in both raids as well as PvP, and actually Team GO Rocket battles as well. So first up, let's start off with Shadow Groudon in raid battles. So for comparison, regular Groudon with Precipice Blades, which is a signature moveset, it's already the best non-mega, non-Shadow Ground type attacker in the game. Now when we factor in Shadows, there's actually going to be two Pokemon that are going to be better than regular Groudon, and that's going to be Shadow Garchomp and Shadow Excadrill. Now on that note as well, Shadow Gible is really difficult to find in-game, so just getting a really good IV spread on this thing is pretty difficult on its own. Anyways though, going back to Shadow Groudon now, this thing ranks both above the Shadow Garchomp as well as the Excadrill by a decent amount as well with Precipice Blades. Now without Precipice Blades though, Shadow Groudon loses a lot of its damage potential. Like, it's actually a pretty big change from Earthquake to Precipice Blades. So when it comes down to using an Elite TM on this Pokemon, I would recommend it, but if you don't have that many Elite TMs, then maybe I would hold off on using it. For example, if you don't even have a regular Groudon build with Precipice Blades and Fire Punch, then I would prioritize the regular Groudon because you can actually Primal Evolve that one, whereas you can't actually Primal Evolve the Shadow. Now with that being said, if you guys actually have an excess amount of Elite TMs just sitting in your storage, then this is a perfect time to actually use one to get an amazing Pokemon in game, and I really doubt that this Pokemon is going to be replaced anytime soon in the raid/gym meta, very similar to Shadow Kyogre. Next up, let's talk about Shadow Groudon in PvP though. So unfortunately, Shadow Groudon is actually slightly worse than its regular counterpart in the Master League. That's the only place that it actually has meta relevance as well. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad, because Shadow Groudon still ranks at number 21 in the overall Master League meta, which is still pretty damn good if I do say so myself. Now that being said though, because this Pokemon does require a double Elite TM in order to have meta relevance, it can be quite a heavy investment. So I just talked about this earlier in the raid/gym meta category, but basically if I had to pick between the regular and the Shadow, I would prefer to invest into the regular Groudon first because I can use the Primal Evolution as well, whereas with the Shadow you can't actually do that. Now finally, let's talk about Shadow Groudon with Team GO Rocket Grunts. So one really cool aspect about regular Groudon is its relevance when fighting Team GO Rocket Grunts as well as leaders, with Precipice Blades as well as Fire Punch. The reason why it's so good is because Precipice Blades is like a heavy damage move, whereas Fire Punch is a super spammy move. It's like the perfect complementary move set to run against Team GO Rocket Grunts as well as leaders, actually especially leaders because of those two shields automatically at first. So basically what this boils down to is that you just have to be more strategic when using Shadow Groudon for Team GO Rocket Grunts as well as leader battles, so just use a stun lock more often, like when you're switching Pokemon or when you're throwing charge moves. For those of you guys who don't know what a stun lock is, like for example, when you throw a charge move, there's going to be like 2 or 3 turns where your opponent's Pokemon does not attack you. That's essentially a stun lock. Now again, like with Shadow Groudon, this is really important because if you're just spamming Fire Punch, you can really take advantage of those stun locks. So very similar to what I said about Shadow Groudon in raids as well as PvP is that I would recommend building a regular one first and then think about building the Shadow one afterwards, because it's kind of a heavy investment, guys. 2 Elite TMs, a whole bunch of Stardust, and candy. That's not exactly the easiest thing to build, but you know, getting one of these things to level 30 to use in the raid/gym meta, that's totally fine. Now finally, to end things off for this video, let's go over stacking your Super Rocket Radars. We'll go over the new method first, the old method, and actually if you even want to stack your Super Rocket Radar for Shadow Groudon. So first of all, in order to actually use the new method in game, all you have to do is just stay on page 1 of the special research. Do not make any progress at all. Like, you can actually complete the tasks, but just don't go past page 1. And then essentially when the next rotation comes in, you're going to automatically unlock the new special research quest without actually having to complete the old one. You can actually do this as many times as you want to. All you have to do is just stay on page 1 of each of those special research quests. And once you guys are actually ready to claim all of your Super Rocket Radars and complete all of those special research quests, all you have to do is just sync up the quest to the Beat Giovanni page, and now you can pretty much just beat Giovanni and complete them all at the same time. If you already went past page 1 of the special research, you guys can actually still use the older method, but this only works for one rollover. So essentially what you want to do is you want to complete all the way up to the second to last page, essentially where you have to beat Giovanni, then just wait on this page until the next special research quest is released, and then essentially once that new Shadow Legendary comes into rotation, which in this case I believe that should be Shadow Rayquaza after June 1st, you guys can use your Super Rocket Radar, complete the quest, get Shadow Rayquaza, and then you are going to unlock the new special research quest the following day. And then from there you guys can use a new method if you want to, or you can just complete that quest if you want to get the Shadow Legendary that's currently in rotation, or if you want to get 2 of them, for example. And again guys, for those of you who don't know, the best way to actually tell what Shadow Legendary Giovanni is going to have, it'll be based on his final Pokemon. You don't have to actually complete the battle, you just have to see what his Pokemon is, and then you can back out and you're still going to keep your Super Rocket Radar. Now with all that being said guys, in this particular situation with Shadow Groudon as the Shadow Legendary Pokemon featured from Giovanni, I would recommend against stacking your Super Rocket Radars because this Pokemon is definitely worth getting. I would probably say to get at least 1 or maybe 2. I wouldn't get more than that just because, you know, we are going to get these Pokemon in Shadow Legendary raids eventually at some point, probably not for like the next year or 2 though, so it is going to be a while. Now overall guys, we covered a lot in this video, so as always, if you have any questions about anything that I talked about, please feel free to comment down below and I'll respond to them as soon as I can. But if you're still looking for some more content, I'm going to recommend these 2 videos right here. Before you go though, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you all real soon in the next one.